It's what really in this city, you said 2007, Paul Boyer had come up with the road plan. Our valuation, the city's taxable valuation, was 3 times what it is today. It was almost $3 billion worth of value in the city that has evaporated, 200% down. We're close to $1 billion now. How do you bring that value back up? And most people's most valuable asset is their home. And in this city, doing things and taking policy choices like investing in infrastructure helps add value and protect value. It's also what attracts other people, and as Commissioner Amoroso stated, the properties that aren't paying taxes now, it's another strategy of getting them on the tax rolls and hopefully redeveloping them too. But it starts with those kinds of fundamentals. So it's a continuation of plans that have been in place, money that's currently we have to put in some of the utility infrastructure, and looking ahead for the future, and either you agree with it or you don't. But I don't know if that gets at your question.
Well, I answered some of it. Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to mention real quick, you had mentioned back in '07, you have a new city commission and a new mayor. I can't speak to what happened in '07, but I can say if they identified these issues in '07, they did nothing about it, and we are now dealing with the problems. So this new commission and this new mayor have identified the problems and are bringing it to you, the voter. I can't speak to what happened in '07 because I wasn't there, but I can tell you nothing happened. Obviously, they spent a lot of money on studies, but nothing was moved forward in any form, and nothing was brought to the voters to actually look at fixing some of that infrastructure. Patty, you had your hand up first?
Yes. I have a couple of questions, but first I want to say that I've recently moved to the city, but I've sort of been attached to the city for a while. And I've watched the city over the last 7 years, and I do agree that right now we do have in place the best that I've seen in 7 years over at City Hall there working. And I don't know if you get enough credit for it, but as an outsider living in the West, where all the beautiful homes are and the beautiful green grass and the wonderful roads, I've moved myself into Lakewood. And some of my neighbors said, are you crazy to move to Lakewood? But it's because I really like the city. And I've recognized that we now have a really good group there. What I do not like what I hear tonight is that not every resident is going to be paying into this program. I'm thinking that is unfair because, for myself, I own 2 homes and I can't have 2 homesteads. So I'm going to only have 1 homestead in the city of Lakewood. Both are here. So I'm going to be paying one at a certain point because I'm in this district, and the other is in another district without a homestead. So I'll be paying sort of like a double share for the same road that I'll be using only once. However, I feel that maybe somewhere we need to look and tap a little deeper, a little further, wider, higher, and find some way that all residents of Lakewood should contribute to this infrastructure, because all residents of Lakewood are using the infrastructure, and we must do it somehow. I don't know how deep, how wide, or high the study was, but I know where I lived out west. You have an association, everybody gets assessed, one fair price. I don't mind having the difference in value because one house is here, another house is in a different section of Lakewood. But I feel every resident who owns a home, who owns a business, who owns a rental property should have a way of paying into this infrastructure. I'm all for the infrastructure because I hear it from my customers that I bring in to Lakewood. We need to do something. So I think you're on the right road, but somehow we must look a little deeper to make this across the board.
I agree with you, and I can tell you and I can assure you on behalf of the commission and this mayor that we did. We looked at every single option, and in a perfect world, everyone should and or would pay into it. But unfortunately, we have a lot of condos that are undervalued. We have the homestead exemptions, so all that plays into it, and we cannot do an assessment for this specific kind of work.
Can there be an ad valorem and non-ad valorem? No?
We just celebrated our 100 years as a city, as a municipality this past year. And, you know, sometimes it's not the best thing to do to go back and be negative on your history, but sometimes you have to take a dose of history so you understand how we got here and how we don't repeat some of the things that happened in the past. You know, I had the good fortune and the honor, if you would, to serve on the commission back in 2001 to 2003. And that was back in the day when many of you might remember the big bond referendum for the beach. A lot of you might remember that. And I stand before you as being one of the few people that opposed that measure back then. My point is this. I was focused in 2001 on infrastructure for our city. Almost every single meeting I went to, I wanted to talk about infrastructure. And it seemed like nobody wanted to listen about infrastructure. We actually brought in some engineers for one of our meetings who gave a presentation on their dime to give us an assessment of an overall picture of where we were at that moment with our infrastructure, and gave us a general idea of what it was going to take for us to kind of catch up with our contemporaries, our neighbors throughout Palm Beach County. And they were summarily, you know, we didn't move forward with that. At that time, I identified the inequity, if you would, of taxpayers versus the non-taxpayers. At that time, in 2001, exactly 1/3 of the properties in this city, exactly 1/3, paid $0 in property taxes. 1/3. Now, what has happened since 2001? One, we didn't address the infrastructure. Two, the cost of fixing the infrastructure continues to increase. Three, our needs for infrastructure continue to increase as the roads deteriorate. Four, our legislators in Tallahassee, for whatever reason, felt it necessary or compelling to increase the homestead exemption to $50,000, where it was $25,000 13 or 14 years ago. So what Tallahassee has done is essentially crippled many of our municipalities in our ability to keep up with our expenses to operate our cities. So now we are in 2014, and that 33% of the property has ballooned. It's ballooned for a couple of reasons. The extra $25,000 in the assessment is one, and the fact that we've had deteriorating infrastructure for another 15 years. So the choice is clear. If we choose, if we take this to the voters, if we take this to you folks, and you opt not to do this, that's fine. We'll just have to continue to figure out how to cobble it together like we've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years. The problem is, each and every year, our roads are going to deteriorate at 3 or 4% rate. Okay? Which means every year during the rainy season, you're going to pick up the phone and you're going to call us and wonder what the heck is going on with the potholes. Every single year, you're just going to pick up the phone and we're going to say we're doing the very best we can. You saw the graphic that said we have $200,000 to work with as far as our road program is concerned. Well, we're sharing with you tonight that we need $63 million to kind of put us back on par with our contemporaries or our folks around Palm Beach County. How many units of $200,000 will it take? How many years will it take for us to catch up to the $60 million that we're talking about tonight? And the point is, we will never catch up. We will never catch up. So this is a very difficult pill to swallow. And for those who may be inclined to be angry about the fact that so few of us perhaps are going to be called on to carry the lion's share of this expense, it's not fair. But you know what? One of the sad realities that I'm finding out as I get older is life often isn't fair. I look at this as protecting my investment in my home. And I would hope that each of you would feel the same way. Each of you have your home that you put a lot of money into it, a lot of tender loving care. If we do not do this, then, and those of you who are in real estate understand that property assessments are, there's a lot of things that go into assessing your value. Infrastructure is a big part of that. So when the property appraiser comes through every 2 or 3 years, or whatever the statute requires them to come through, and they continue to ride up and down pothole-filled streets, where's the motivation for them to increase the value of that property? So that's kind of where we are. So it's a tough pill to swallow, but just to give you a perspective historically of where we are 15 years ago, where we are today, and what potentially could happen if we don't come up with something like that.
So I want to go over here to the show.
I lived in the south end of West Palm a few years ago and moved here. And the area we lived in, right off the Bollards, Colonial Road, they did just what you're talking about. In a lot of cases, they went in and totally redid the roads, sidewalks, lighting, and everything there. Did a beautiful job on it. Home values did go up. I mean, place looks great, you know. Plus they got rid of all the 1930s piping and stuff that was underground there. You have to do that, you know that. My other thing about this though is, one of the things that I'm not sure if you've done or whatever, but you have to put in place some kind of funding to maintain this once you do it, or you're going to be 40 years, you're going to be right back where you are again.
Commissioner John Zerdy has joined us, and he's a green architect by profession, and he's going to talk a little bit about what we've done as far as setting it up for maintenance, and maybe you want to mention a little bit about the company that we're looking to hire to actually make sure that this funding is being spent.
Good evening. Hi. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, I came here about 8 years ago when you couldn't hardly buy a piece of property because as soon as a sign went up, it was probably getting sold. It was pretty unusual. And there is money in this for not only maintenance, but also for supervision of outside engineering firms and all, to make sure the project gets done correctly. Now that has been an issue in the past with large projects for small towns to try to handle, and try to handle it in-house. And I don't think it's had a very good history of that around here. So that part of it's important for us to be conservative on our resources. But 8 years ago when I moved in there, I'm on South Palmway, I purchased a house that was not even habitable. It had all kinds of stairs on the outside, and it converted this thing to 4 units. It was supposed to be that way. So I moved my family in there. We completely gutted the house. I spent over $300,000 for a house that you couldn't even live in. That's probably wasn't too smart, but it was, I believed in the city, I still do. I not only want to protect that investment and the extra money I put into it, but I still think it will be worth it. At that time, what was our tax rates? How much money did you pay in taxes 5 or 6 years ago compared to now? How dissatisfied were you with that kind of payment that you made compared to now? We will see things improve around here. I guess it's kind of a faith as well, a belief and pride in our city. I think things have changed, and you all can see some of the changes. I'm happy to be part of a group and the staff and a community that has a tremendous amount of volunteer help. I mean, it's amazing around here. But we all like living east. We all like living around this area. And there's not going to be any more towns like us that are going to be made. They're going to try, but they can't do it. So I think we want to think about where we were, what we were paying before, what we can still pay right now to get us past this point. We're so close. I'm in the business. I'm an architect and a contractor, and I know a lot of folks that have been really watching our city closely. In fact, the folks that got into the Gulf Stream, I've been working on things for them in Delray. I asked them, why don't you come up and take a look? He said, we've been watching. And they did, and they purchased that. Folks like that watch things close, they're smart folks. They weren't making that move because things aren't worth doing that. You compare a house, your house here, and look at, would you be able to buy that house for the same in West Palm, or down in Delray, or some other cities like this, close to the water with what we have, close to the airport. You all know what's great here. What would it be worth? Look at that. We're going to get there, but in that sense, we are refilling our city. We have a group here that's been focused on promoting our sweet little cottages in our town. And we're getting a lot of people interested. Just recently, the bankers have looked at the values increasing to the point where they're able to loan money on these little cottages now because their values have come up. That was a problem before. We've been dealing with foreclosures and demolitions and things like that, a lot of code changes. You see our land development goes, people look at this as a stable time a more stable time that they can count on. So if folks can come in and put money down in this town, I'm sure that we can try to do the best we can and really consider this hard in terms of our own resources here. We do want to recycle what we have. It's a great town in that regard, but things are being watched more closely, and we welcome you all to watch things more closely. Lord knows we've heard a lot of things over the years, and this was a response to those requests and those situations. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'm going to go all the way to the back, the young lady in the back.
Thanks. I have a couple of questions. First of all, when are you thinking of doing this ask? Secondly, when you ask voters for this bond and how it's going to be structured, what is your language going to be? Because you said before that this is going to be essentially 3 bonds. You're going to borrow money 3 times, and then your total ask, what you're asking the voters is for up to $63,000, or $63 million. I wish it was $63,000, but $63 million. That we may not be borrowing that maximum amount. And finally, for my third question, which has nothing to do with this, which has to do with sidewalks and pedestrian safety. And since we're all about walkable downtown, I don't know if you've seen what Sweden's been doing with revamping their roads and restructuring, but if we are going to be doing sidewalks, we are going to be thinking about sidewalks in our downtown, economic development, walkability, all that stuff kind of dovetails. So more of the technical questions now.
Okay, I'll attempt the first one. The ballot language will be very specific. It's about the infrastructure, the sidewalks, the traffic calming, the road repairs, and all those things that would be funded out of a specific dollar amount of $63.5 million. So you would be approving the borrowing of up to that amount for those purposes. The 3 borrowings that Commissioner Amoroso mentioned is, if you have a 5-year construction plan, because we can't design and build all that immediately, you borrow enough to do the first 2 years, then you borrow enough to do the next 2 years, and you have a final borrowing. So it's 3 separate, what they call tranches. Sounds very professional. But it's 3 separate borrowings, and each one of those would run 30 years. And they would borrow enough money as we go. If we're fortunate enough to see some money come in from Tallahassee or some grants that we haven't factored into this, we've been very conservative, then the option is not to borrow as much in the next borrowings or pick up other projects that maybe the community wants. That's a decision that gives you that flexibility, and that's what he was talking about. What's the third issue? Oh, August 26th is a primary that we can piggyback on and not cost the city a lot of money. So that's the date that we're currently looking at.
And why are we doing August instead of November?
And then your pedestrian facility, are you doing any additional pedestrian facilities or beefing up anything in the downtown area as part of this infrastructure plan?
When you say downtown, Lake and Lucerne specifically, or those are state roads. We're focused on city-owned roads, so it's mainly the roads in the neighborhoods. Judy?
I have a question. I just want to make sure I understand how the millage works. It's 3.2%. What was that?
It's 2.45. But
Could you repeat her question?
Okay,
we can't hear. That's the millage rate.
And so we're going to borrow the first borrowing, and then we're going to be hit with this increase. And you can say a hamburger, but it's going to cost us probably more like $800 a year. So that's going to run for 30 years, right? And then you're going to hit us with another one, which is going to be another $800.
No.
This is what I want to make sure I understand.
Let's be very clear. We tried to simplify it. Even though it's broken down into 3 borrowings, the first borrowing would be reflected at a much lower millage rate, which we didn't put up there because it gets confusing. The maximum millage rate we're projecting based on a 4% a year property valuation increase, which is very conservative across the city. When we had borrowed all $63.5 million, that's what we're projecting is the total millage rate. Understand, if it's approved, we're borrowing a dollar amount. As the property valuation base increases, as these properties hopefully start to gain some value and come on the tax rolls or other properties become more valuable, that millage rate actually drops. So your share, potentially, if we're successful in the next 5 years, we're giving you hopefully a worst case scenario on what the impact would be to your tax, because the millage rate is set each year against the valuation to raise enough money to make the debt payments. So as the valuation base grows, your piece of the pie becomes smaller. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Young lady in the middle. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question also about the millage, and one of the things that concerns me is that this 3.45 is 50% more than any other city in Palm Beach County. Lake Worth is already at the very, very top of Palm Beach County in terms of millage rate. And I guess the concern I have is that, yes, you're right, if lots of people decide to come to Lake Worth and buy properties here, then theoretically it's going to get less expensive for the 36% of us who are going to foot the bill for this thing. But conversely, if people say, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about buying a new house, and I'm not sure I want to go to Lake Worth, where the millage is going to be 3.45, and I could go to Delray, where it's 2.23, then the 36% of us could end up being, I don't know, 10% of us who are going to be stuck with the $63.2 million debt. What have you done, I guess, to look at other cities that have taken this kind of a step to take themselves so far away from the average in terms of millage, and how did it turn out for them?
And that's a good point. The reason the millage rate is high, and it's actually a total for us of 8.99 mils when you include fire rescue, because we contract, it goes up actually for Palm Beach County. The remainder is what we get. How much money do you think the city receives on that 5.4 mils that we charge the tax base? Does anybody have an idea how many millions of dollars we generate in property taxes on that? It's just over $5.5 million. That gives you the indication that we're so highly undervalued that even with the high millage rate, you're paying for the property value a lot less. The same properties, and I think Commissioner Zerdy made the point, the same property, if it was picked up and transported to a Delray, we couldn't afford it because it would be valued and on the market at a much higher rate. So that's kind of the give and take in this thing. So does that help you a little bit? We hope to see a day, theoretically, everything improves in the city, the tax base grows, everybody's paying something, things are good, all the millage rates come down.
Of course.
And that's
have you looked at other, like, what was the basis for you determining, like, what hard data did you look at, or other cities did you look at that were in a similar situation? Lake Worth can't be the only one in the country that this works. Cities
go into debt all the time. If you look at, I think maybe in West Palm, they have their tax rate and they have debt. They do that all the time. It's what cities do to incur enough money to do projects. It's not an uncommon thing. What we did was we approached it from what were the complaints we were getting, what were the needs in the community, and what were the experts giving us in empirical data, assessing the problem, and then generating the dollar amounts. Okay? And that's why it has to go to you for those approvals. There's not a cookie cutter formula from city to city. It's amazing, though, that as far as valuations and some of our statistics, we actually have more in common sometimes with the Glades communities than we do with Palm Beach, which is right next door. And we're trying to do strategies to add value so that we can start to become a healthy community.
I'm going to jump over to Mary.
Thank you. City Manager, Commissioners, whoever can answer this question, which is pretty specific to College Park. According to the map, College Park is slated to receive a lot of road surfacing and very little in new roads. I also understand, and you've got the pipes here to prove the need for it, that there's a lot of water pipe replacement planned for College Park, correct? That is not a part of this, but will be funded through increases in the water utilities. Am I correct so far?
Yes.
Here's my question. If the streets are going to have to be dug up to accommodate the new water pipes, why aren't they just going to be done altogether, and in that way get us the new sidewalks we need?
As part of Lake Worth 2020, when we talk about a new road, that's a definition that should be real clear. It's tearing up the entire road base and everything and getting down at the infrastructure underneath, like the water lines, and adding new water lines, larger water lines, fixing the fire hydrant issues, capacities, and volumes. And that was identified in that 2005 study. That's a new road project that starts with everything underneath and then everything new on top.
The red lines on the map.
Those are in the rights of ways. Those are think of them as the transmission lines for getting the water out to all the various parts of the city.
Okay.
The new road, the other projects that we call resurfacing, we're going to be milling and getting down and looking at the road base, and then building just the road surface back up, the curbs, and the sidewalk replacements. So it's two different kinds of projects. A lot of the water lines and things that you're talking about are services that go from the transmission lines in alleyways and other places that we're not tearing up, that isn't a new road per se. So it's almost three different kinds of projects. These show you completely new roads, we tear up everything, or just the road surface because there isn't a need to tear up anything underneath. Does that make it a little clearer?
No, I understand, since we don't have any alleyways in College Park, and I'm wondering where these water lines are.
There's easements, and there's, most of those, I think, lie in easements. And then Larry, this is Larry Johnson, he's the Water Utilities Director.
Good evening. And Mary, to answer the question, is the items basically where in College Park you do not have alleyways. In those cases, we will be moving the water lines to the roads. And if we do that, we will be coordinating with these projects so that, we put, that's where you see the red lines where we're putting the water lines in the road before, the road is reconstructed. In most of the city, when we replace these water lines, it will be done in the alleyways, and so we'll be doing that separately, and it will be paid for through the utility bill. And part of the reason for that was that that goes to address that essentially everyone will be paying for that throughout the city, because everyone has a water utility bill. So again, from a fairness standpoint, it was felt that the addressing that through the water utility rates was better than addressing it through increases in taxes.
Thank you, but I still don't understand where the water lines in College Park are going to be going. If they're not going in the alleyway, what easements are you talking about? Because there's only two small portions of two streets in College Park that are slated as new roads.
We can go through in detail with you on that. In many of the cases that the water lines have already been relocated into the road, and so in that case the water line is already in front of the road, in front of the properties, not in the back. In those cases where it is in the back and there is no alleyway, then they will be relocated to the front of the property and put in the road. And we will definitely coordinate to make sure that if it's slated for a milling and resurfacing or slated for a reconstruction, that the pipe goes in before the